The Fox 36 and the RockShox Lyrik are, in my opinion, two of the best single crown forks on the market today. After testing a whole load of forks from the likes of Öhlins, Formula and MRP, it still seems to be the two big players who keep coming out on top when it comes to long travel enduro forks. To find out which is best, I've been testing 2018 versions of these forks, the RockShox Lyrik RCT3 and the Fox 36 Factory Fit 4. These are both pretty high-end forks. The Lyrik comes in at £970 in the UK and the Fox is £1,049 in the UK. So here the Fox is a bit more expensive, but actually in the USA the order is reversed, so the Fox is actually a little bit cheaper than the Lyrik if you live in the US. Fox actually offers an even more expensive version of the 36, which is the RC2. This offers independent high and low speed compression adjustment, but that's kind of taking it a little bit higher than the Lyrik in terms of price. It also doesn't offer the climbing modes that the Lyrik offers, so I chose the Fit 4 because it's the most natural comparison to the Lyrik. So for 2018, RockShox have updated the charger damper. It now takes less force to adjust the climbing switch, so it can now be compatible with an external remote lockout. Also, they've kind of recalibrated the range of low-speed compression adjustment to give more options for riders who want a lighter damping setup. Meanwhile, Fox have completely changed the air spring in the Fox 36. They're calling this the Evol air spring, and as with their air shocks, this means that they've got a larger negative air spring, with the aim of making it softer and more supple off the top, but also giving you more support after sag, basically trying to make an air spring feel a little bit more like a coil spring in terms of its off-the-top sensitivity and traction, but also more predictable, smoother support through the mid-stroke. So Fox say that their Evol air spring gives you a lot more support in the mid-stroke, and as a result they feel they can go lighter on the compression damping side without the fork diving too much. So what they've done with this latest iteration of the Fit 4 damper is made the shim stack a bit more flexible. And what that means is that when the fork compresses, oil is forced against those shims, which are like flexible metal washers. And as you hit a bump hard, the oil tries to sort of force those shims open like a kind of spring-loaded door. And what they've done with the latest tune is made those shims a little bit more flexible so that if you hit something really hard, the oil can flow a bit more easily. So you get a little bit less support from the damper, but on the other hand, it's a bit more supple. The way Fox put it to me was they said it's designed to sort of take the edge off high-speed square-edged hits. So that's the theory, but how do they compare in terms of performance in the real world? I've been riding these forks back to back on a range of terrain, including some really kind of high-speed, rough and rocky tracks. So obviously in order to do a fair comparison, it is really important to get both forks set up as best as they can be, but also as similarly as possible. To do this, I used my tried and tested method for setting up suspension. If you want to find out how to do this yourself, click the link up above. The first thing I noticed when it came to swapping from the Lyrik to the Fox was that the Fox felt a lot more sort of stuck down. It feels like the first sort of 20–25% of the travel is a lot softer, and it seems to sort of track the terrain better, especially on sort of drifty and off-camber corners, where the front wheel wants to almost lift off the ground. Just that softer initial stroke seems to help keep the front wheel tracking a little bit more consistently. I also noticed that on the longer, rougher trails, when I swapped back to the Lyrik, that I was getting a lot more kind of hand pain. There seems to be a lot more buzz and feedback through the bars with the Lyrik than with the 36. It seems like the Fox 36 maybe has a bit less friction, but generally is a lot more sensitive over kind of small bumps and kind of chattery trails. So it seems the Fox was certainly more sensitive and more active over smaller bumps. But actually what really surprised me was that the Lyrik was also using more travel in certain situations. It seems to me like the Fox is at once more sensitive and more active over smaller bumps, but remains higher in its travel when you're hitting things really hard. What I suspect is going on with these two forks is a difference in the shim stacks and how they're designed. It feels like the Lyrik is more reluctant to move on kind of small stutter bumps, but if you hit something really hard, it feels like it opens up too much and dumps through the travel too much, as if that shim stack is just opening up too suddenly and allowing a load of oil to pass through too quickly. So it's a little bit firmer on small hits, but if you hit something really hard, it just dumps through the travel a little bit too much for my liking. Whereas with the Fox, I think the shim stack opens up a bit more gradually, so you get that kind of small bump sensitivity, but if you hit something hard, it doesn't give too much travel away. I'm not sure if this is the whole story though. There might also be differences in the kind of chassis friction between the two forks, but I tried to get this spring curve as similar as I possibly could with both forks, so I think most of the difference is down to the damping tune. It also feels to me that, as far as I can tell, the Lyrik is a little bit stiffer than the Fox 36, and this actually might be contributing to that feedback and buzz through the handlebars I was experiencing. I think if you look at the slow motion footage, there's actually a surprising amount of flex in both forks, but I didn't find it particularly off-putting most of the time, although they will both twist a little bit if you really push them hard in a kind of rocky corner. While I did find that the 36 is both really supportive and impressively supple, it's not perfect. Both myself and my colleague Rob Weaver have experienced an issue with top out. This is because to make the new Evol air spring, Fox have got rid of most of the top out bumper that was in the old 36. And as a result, when you pull up really hard to do a bunny hop or a manual, sometimes the fork tops out with a noticeable bump as it hits the end of its travel. It's really not going to affect your riding, but both of us found it a little irritating. And if you're spending over £1,000 on a fork, this kind of thing shouldn't really be happening. Having said that, we have tested one 2018 fork that didn't have this issue, so it may be a kind of production issue. Hopefully it'll be something that Fox will sort out. But either way, I think it's really something you can live with. So to recap, I think, based on my testing, that the Lyrik is very slightly stiffer, but the Fox's air spring is much more supple off the top and kind of provides a more kind of gradual build-up of support through the mid-stroke. Also, the damping is more sensitive to small bumps and more supportive when you start hitting things harder. And as a result, I really preferred how the Fox felt. I felt more confident in the levels of support it gave me, but also felt that it was much more sensitive and supple and reduced my hand pain and fatigue on long, rough runs. Having said that, the Lyrik is still a really top quality fork, so if you've got a bike that comes with a Lyrik on it, don't go spending £1,000 on a 36 to try and upgrade, because the differences are fairly subtle. But if you're lucky enough to have £1,000 to spend and you want one of the best enduro forks out there, it's the 36 that I would go for.